Hello, I am Washington Post video game reporter Nathan Grayson, and I am here backstage at Forest Hill Stadium with Claudio Sanchez of Coheed and Cambria.
Hi.
And we're going to talk about video games because
right.
that's what our video game vertical at the Washington Post launcher does. So I guess to start, I saw that you brought a game console with you on tour.
Mm-hmm.
It is a PlayStation 5. Why is that your game console of choice?
I think it's probably the exclusives that come on PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the reason why I brought that one out.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, and I have more PlayStation games than I do Xbox. I mean, I have all the platforms, but I think for out here, this one made sort of the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so when you're on tour, what do you play on it?
So I've been playing a lot of casual games, like the free-for-alls like Call of Duty, Fortnite. But if I want to get into something a little more immersive, I've been slowly getting back into Elden Ring. I also brought out Guardians of the Galaxy because I realized that had been sitting on the shelf unopened, so I grabbed that. Things like that. I find that out here, it helps me just kind of sit in isolation, not talk, rest my voice, and usually falling into a game like Fortnite is perfect for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so how's Elden Ring treating you though? Is it
horrible?
Have you been able to make much progress at all? You're just oh no, this is destroying me.
Well, no, I have made some progress, but now it's been a minute. The last time I really got into the game was the last tour we were on. And so I've been away from it for a minute. So I'm sort of getting my bearings as to where I left off. And but yeah, it's a frustrating game. But what I love about it is it reminds me of those games from my youth, where it's you had to keep grinding it out until you made it past that point that you just couldn't get to, and I love it for that. And it just reminds me of a contemporary version of that first Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an inspiration. Yeah, I mean, you were talking though about kind of the process of being on tour and how you end up needing to sort of rest your voice and stuff like that. And so I mean, was that always sort of a conscious thought when it came to playing games on tour? It's okay, I've got to take some time away right now and just sort of make sure that I'm ready to go for tomorrow night or what have you? It's
more. It's sort of a new thing that I'm starting to realize. The older I get, the more I need rest and fluids and all sorts of stuff that really needs to that I need to sort of execute the set that we put together. And that's it. So I mean, sitting in that room with the console reminds me, oh, I have to drink this. I have to, these are the lozenges I need to take. So yeah, it just kind of puts me into a schedule, and I'm liking it because it allows me to put on headphones and just zone out, and no one bothers me.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and so for at least part of this tour, right? You've had Atlas with you.
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all play games together on the tour bus?
We do. His game of choice, however, is Mario Kart. So we do have a Switch out here, and he gets a lot of the guys on the crew to play with him because they all have their Switches, and they wirelessly connect them, and they all play together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Does he devastate them? Does he just run circles around them?
He's good, but he's starting to learn that he needs to get the drift mechanic down because they're starting to figure that out.
So in addition to having a band, you're also creating a pro Mario Kart circuit kind of in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has he hit the point yet where he's started to beat you in games?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. But that's usually the game that we play. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, Minecraft is his other game, which he plays in creative, and he's created a pretty interesting little world, very MC Escher-ish. It's pretty cool. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, another sort of game-related subject that I wanted to ask you about is that obviously like you've been streaming on Twitch a fair amount, at least while not on tour. And yeah, I was curious about that from the perspective of like, you've explained in many interviews that like part of the reason you created the Amory Wars, the story behind Coheed and Cambria, is that initially you had sort of trouble communicating your actual like emotions and thoughts and feelings in music.
Right.
That was a little bit nerve-wracking for you. And so instead you created this fiction to surround them. And so then like flash forward all these years later, and you're like going on a platform where the entire idea is just to straightforwardly communicate with people,
right.
hundreds of people at once, which is like, I've got to imagine that's kind of it's an interesting juxtaposition. So how do you feel about doing that now after like all of this time of kind of, not hiding behind a fiction, but like creating one to encompass what you actually think and feel?
Right. Well, for me, it's like I'm talking to myself because there's really no one there in the room. But I also feel like I'm talking with a sect of our audience that's like myself. We're all kind of in that boat, and I don't know. There's something about it that there are days where I have those off days where I'm like, why do I do this? Because it's very uncomfortable. But then there are others where I'm like, oh, this is really sort of helping me, and even with like my approach to banter, when we play live, so for me, I think it's just I'm using it as like a tool to just to feel a bit more comfortable with myself. So, but yeah, I enjoy it. I actually tried to stream a couple of times out here. That's why the rig that you were seeing earlier, that's actually like not a work in progress, but more of an experiment. Yeah, just because I want to understand like exactly what I need when I actually build one, because I also need to encompass the recording side of Coheed into that rig. So, but yeah. I enjoy it. It allows me to do something that I've never done before, and yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, well, yeah, you were talking about how like it, maybe impacts your approach to like on stage banter and stuff like that. How does it sort of change it? Like, what have you noticed that you're able to do, I guess, a little bit more like effectively or what have you when you're on stage that sort of came from streaming on Twitch and talking to people in that way?
Yeah, just being kind of impulsive and just, I don't know. There's just this somewhat of a comfort that I get now when the moment comes where I have to engage, and I think a little bit of that has to do with, with understanding what maybe the audience might want from a moment like that, and that's what I'm getting from the Twitch stream, at least from the fans that are participating in it. So.
Yeah, I mean, does that kind of like increased, I guess, closeness ever come with like have you ever been playing a show and thinking like, wait, I bet like one of those people like from the Twitch stream or whatever is like out there right now?
Yeah, actually I've met a few on in the meet and greets, and we've actually had like connections in the chat, and they've spilled over into the meet and greet. So. Yeah, I think that's cool, and that's the thing about the Twitch, the followers that are a part of my channel is it's not like a huge portion of the Coheed base. It's really kind of the gamer sect of the fan base, and I think that's cool. I don't know if I'd. That's why I don't keep VODs, is I'm not entirely sure I want it to get any bigger. So
yeah, that's actually really interesting that you just like want to keep it kind of small and personal, and yeah, especially because like you've also like, I know that you shared like some snippets of like your Dorian Gray musical and stuff on there, like, which is something that you've I think talked about previously, but that's like a very, I guess, like personal thing to share. And so like at what point did you sort of reach a level of comfort where you said like, yeah, I'm willing to like show that to these people, even if I'm not going to like officially release it in some capacity?
Right. I don't know. I think like I said, it was just very impulsive. I'm not entirely sure that was like my motive, like when going on that day when I decided to share that music. But it feels like that. I'm not that type of person in most of my day. But that stream sort of allows me to be kind of something else, and I'm starting to take that something else and putting it into what I've been doing now for 20 years, playing in Coheed and Cambria.
Another question I had about Twitch, you were talking about like, not saving VODs and everything, is like, you also, at least sometimes, like play some licensed music and things like that, like to jam along to it. Is that also part of your thinking of like, oh, I can't save this because I'm going to get in trouble?
Right, absolutely. And I love that because it gives me something to pivot off of, and maybe talk about, and, like a connection that I may have had with it, and, and how that translates into the band. And, that's another reason why I like not keeping the VODs is,
Yeah, I think the eternal question off the back of that for like any musician is, with kind of like the way that Twitch processes music in mind, like would you ever be like, yeah, the Coheed library can now be like played on Twitch just to like let people, have that and be able to experience it without, fear of having their streams zapped off the internet?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm at this point, sure. I mean, I don't know what that entails, but I think at some point that'll probably become a reality.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think that, I mean, given the opportunity, or even if it's even something like in the works already, like would you ever compose a soundtrack for a game?
Possibly. I mean, if the right idea came along, I've never been asked to, but sure, yeah, I'd be open to it.
I mean, have you like thought about it just beyond kind of like being open to it? Like, how would you approach it if the opportunity presented itself?
Yeah, I guess it all depends on what the type of game, if it's sort of something quirky, then I would maybe resort to that like Wes Anderson side of my brain, or if it was something more, action-ish and darker, probably rely heavily more on the programming side and the synth-based stuff that I do, but of course, like maybe incorporating, the band elements into it. I don't know. I've never been approached with the idea, so I'm not entirely sure how to do it. But yeah, I'd give it my best.
Yeah. Do you ever, I mean, because, you're a musician, I imagine, you end up like in your head hearing music ideas for it pretty frequently. Does that ever come about when you're playing a game? Like, for example, Elden Ring or something. Have you ever been like, oh yeah, like this is a song idea that I now have as a result of this game?
Oh yeah, sometimes, yeah. There have been moments, I think, where just music has sat somewhere in my subconscious, and when I like played something, I've thought, oh well, that seems a little like that. I mean, one of the biggest ones is Welcome Home and Tetris. Like, for some reason, I'm not saying that Tetris is like the inspiration for the riff in Welcome Home, but they definitely live in that same like whatever scale that is. But every when I hear the Tetris theme, I'm like, oh wow, for some reason it reminds me of Welcome Home. So it must be living somewhere in there,
Yeah, that's actually really interesting too, because I do feel like, going back to the first time I ever heard Welcome Home, I was like, this riff is somehow familiar, even though I've not heard the song before.
And there you
like,
go.
And like, not in a bad way, just in this way of like, yeah, why do I feel like I know this? Yeah. No, that's really, that's funny. But yeah, I guess the other side of all of this is that, like there's in recent times, especially like in games like Fortnite, kind of been an increasing prevalence of like in-game concerts. Like, I don't know if you saw the Ariana Grande thing that they did a little while back, other shows like that. I mean, like, is that something where like you look at it as like something that you would like to do for Coheed at some point in the future?
Oh,
like
I would love
in-game concert.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know if we're of that caliber of artist, But I did. I watched that. I participated in the Ariana Grande thing, as like research, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is an interesting way to bring the music out there. It even had opening acts, like in mini games. I found it very intriguing, but I just don't know if we're at that place where Fortnite would be like, yeah, let's throw a Coheed and Cambria concert.
I mean, maybe the key is to like just go back to your roots, just like go into a game and just start playing a concert, just have people show up.
Right.
Go into Roblox, be like, we're playing, we don't need your support.
I mean, I think that being said though, I think we do have like we have all the assets to create something pretty interesting, you know, with the Amory Wars, with the Vaxis story, characters,
Right.
music, you know, there's something there that, you know, I think we have that others might not, you know, to sort of start with, you know.
Right.
So, but we'll see. Who knows?
Yeah. We had Tim Sweeney of Epic Games, if you're listening. There you go. You got your next concert. But yeah, I mean, speaking more about like games generally, you know, obviously the pandemic happened. And I think the last time that you and I really talked about video game stuff was pre-pandemic. It was around the time Vaxis 1 came out. And so I was just wondering, like, did you have any particular games you played in the pandemic? And especially given that, like, everyone was trapped inside and kind of not able to do much else, did that at all change your relationship to the things that you played?
Yeah, well, for me, you know, Call of Duty was the big one because that was, you know, at the time of the pandemic, you know, people at the label were suggesting, you know, Twitch as an avenue to reach our audience, and I was a little apprehensive at that time because I just didn't have the tools to really execute it in a way that I thought would be appropriate for me. But Call of Duty was definitely the game I was playing as like just, you know, to sort of ready myself for it. Like, what's the game I'm going to pivot off of? And that's the thing is I hadn't been playing much of that sort of game. What would you call that when co-op online multiplayer? Like that's just not sort of was normally not my thing. I liked games like Elden Ring, games that I could get into, follow a campaign, follow the story, and be done with it, and you know, maybe be inspired by it. But Twitch sort of got me into this online competitive sort of thing. Not that I'm that good.
Yeah.
Not that I'm good, but yeah, but it got me interested in that, and I think it helped sort of push me into the streaming. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Nathan.
No,
but
I think it does to an
all
extent.
right.
But yeah, I mean, like, speaking of that, you know, I think that we talked in the past about like how some games have at least served as, you know, like sort of partial inspirations for things that you've done. I think you mentioned like Halo a while back. For like Vaxis 2, were there any video game like inspirations that seeped into that album or into its narrative?
I don't think so. Nothing that I can recall. You know, I think for me, a lot of Vaxis or Vaxis 2 is just the experience of my wife and I, through, you know, being parents in the pandemic. You know, it's hard. It's hard to find like an aesthetic from a game that maybe had gave me some inspiration into what the story would become. But I'm not sure if I can find any. But yeah, I'm sure there's something. You know.
Yeah, that's how it tends to be, right? Inspirations are sort of nebulous and come from all different directions.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, I have to once again find my train of thought. Let's see. I guess in terms of just a few more like general questions, because I'm just curious about this stuff. You know, like Vaxis 2 was, before it came out, kind of a record that you said would be challenging for kind of like the Coheed audience and things like that. Was it scary at all to release it? Like, I mean, it's obviously been very well received, but before it came out, were you like, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, like a little bit worried?
No, we had so much time to sit on Vaxis 2. Like, we finished Vaxis 2, like, it's been a year since we were done with the actual writing, recording of the record, and then in that year, between like that you know, the final cuts to the actual release, we had been working on all of the assets, you know, working on the story with my wife, the illustrations with Chase, the relic that we were going to manufacture that came with it. So all of this stuff like became like, you know, that was what I was focusing on. So it was hard at first, you know, initially when we were done with it, I was like, you know, there are going to be some challenging songs on this record. But for the most part, like, kind of forgot about that because the record had been done for so long and we were living with it. It almost felt like it was already out,
Right.
you know, and nobody cared because, you know, again, it was out. We were done with it, but
Right.
But you know, no one had a chance to listen to it. But it's been so well received. Like, to my surprise, you know, even songs that I thought would be challenging and would, be met with distaste, like I'm actually kind of like excited about it and proud of the fan base for accepting all of these new things that we were bringing to them. I think it's all I'm so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been really cool to like, for example, like people are really into like Disappearing Act.
Right.
It's like pretty different territory for y'all.
Yeah.
But it's just like everyone's like, oh yeah, this is a bop.
Yeah, it's I'm so excited, and that's the next single. We're gonna put a video out for that. Like we were like, it seems to be the one that a lot of the fan base is resonating with. So let's make it the next one.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So,
I think that you've said in some other interviews, it's kind of a result of that, that like acceptance, and also just Vaxis being kind of like a different record for y'all, that it feels like a little bit of like almost a new beginning for Coheed. And so like, what do you kind of want to do with that new beginning? Where do you kind of see this going?
Oh yeah, that's so tough because honestly, like you said earlier about the Dorian Gray project. When we were finished with Vaxis 2, that was where I was leaning. Like maybe we'll do, an intermission in the Vaxis story and go and approach this other musical that I've had sitting on the shelf. But because there's so much excitement around Vaxis 2, I'm starting to change my mind and think about, maybe we need to get back into Vaxis 3. So it's tough. At this moment, I haven't really thought much. Aside from that, I find myself just really excited about this tour and everyone's excitement for the record, that I'm actually just kind of enjoying myself in the moment.
Yeah.
And so it's tough to say what we're going to do in the future, but I think we're leaning to get into Vaxis 3. So.
And then, I guess like kind of more broadly in terms of just like, goals for the band, where you see the band going. Like, I know that you've talked about feeling like there's still room for the band to kind of grow to a point where like more people, are aware of the band and things like that. Is that still kind of the idea, that you want to like, you feel like there's still this untapped potential in Coheed to be a little bit more mainstream, to be a little bit bigger in that sense? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, this tour is a big, I'm seeing it on this tour, bigger rooms. We've played some of our first arenas on this run, and it's, I absolutely can grow. There is room. So we'll see. But yeah, that's always the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's interesting to me because, like, again, earlier you were talking about, kind of a desire to, like, with your Twitch channel, keep things kind of a little bit more smaller and more intimate. And so I guess for you, like, as somebody who I think, would you describe yourself as kind of like a bit of an introvert?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so like, how do you sort of square those ideas of like, you want to, get bigger, take things to this bigger level where there are obviously tons of people, but at the same time still maintain that kind of like smaller personal intimacy in these elements of your career?
So for me, when it comes to being in this band and being on that stage, and playing the music, I don't feel as sheltered and introverted as I do in like my day-to-day life, walking down the street, having to interact with the world. So it's like two different people. So in one way, like keeping the Twitch stream kind of small is really because you're getting more of my personality, whereas like when I'm up there playing with my friends, it's like I'm almost anonymous. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's when you say anonymous, how do you mean?
Like, I just don't feel like me. I feel like someone else. It's only in those moments where I have to engage, where I feel like I come back, and I'm like, oh.
That's a lot of people.
But when I'm running around, jumping and singing and doing that sort of thing, it feels unreal,
Wow, it's really interesting. I feel like if I was up there, I'd just be like, ah. The obvious other big question, talking about having all of these like things that you could already apply to, for example, an in-game concert or something of that nature is like, in the same way that you've talked in the past about wanting to do like an Amory Wars TV show or movie or what have you. And like, you know, in the deeper past, there was a Amory Wars mobile game. Do you want to revisit the idea of like an Amory Wars game?
Oh, absolutely. I want to, I want to bring the Amory Wars to as many platforms as I possibly can. We've been trying the television feature route, but it's a tough sell because it's an expensive endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
When you look
sure
at
is.
when you look at it, I mean, it's big sci-fi world building, so it needs the right partner to ensure that it gets executed properly. Games might be the avenue. I mean, I feel very immersed in a game like Elden Ring. Like, I want the story. I want to overcome whatever obstacles to gain that story. So maybe that's an avenue to consider for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd like to bring it everywhere as much as I could.
Yeah. Lastly, because so ages ago, mainly because I had heard an interview that you did before any Vaxis stuff came out, so I correctly predicted that that Sirius would return
Right.
in Vaxis, in any of the Vaxis stories. And so I want to try another prediction now that you can once again be like, I'm not going to tell you anything.
Oh, okay.
Which is basically so he's back. There's at least one prize who's there as well. So we're like getting elements of, both previous stories. And then like Vaxis himself experiences everything all at once, constantly. And so, I mean, feels like the past is coming back to the present. So in the same way that your character in the first kind of series of albums destroyed the keywork, is Vaxis going to find a way to recreate the keywork?
I'm not telling you. That's not right. I don't know if that's happened. No, I can't. Nathan!
Spoil the rest of the story. I did it. Okay, fantastic.